notice. Okay, so welcome everybody. There might be a few folks joining as we get started, as we continue, but we wanted to go ahead and start for this forest management workshop. And I am not Vance Russell, as it says in the square. My name is Kathleen Dowd, and I'm a consultant with the Forest Business Alliance team. And so I'll be facilitating the call today. If you haven't already, please do put your name and where you're calling from and your affiliation in the chat so we can get a sense of who's here. And I want to just start with a quick slide to kind of acknowledge and honor the funding. Here we go. Come on. Okay. Well, it's not working for that. But anyways, here I want to acknowledge the Forest Business Alliance is funded by CAL FIRE and the Yuba Water Agency. We provide technical assistance, workshops, and peer learning networks to increase local and regional capacity for Forest Service sector business and organizations. And the primary contacts for this, should you wish to have further information, are Carrie, Regine, and Vance. So please do feel free to reach out. This information will be included, and we will send this contact information as we send out the recording link as well. So because we want to make sure that we're really speaking to exactly what folks are hoping to gain and learn from today, we're going to start this one a little bit differently. We do have some poll questions that I'll put forth shortly. But we wanted to just take a moment and offer an opportunity for folks to come off of mute and share. If you're also welcome to put this in the chat and I can read those for the recording, to see if there's anything specific that you're really hoping to learn or understand or gain information about today. And that'll help the presenters. They've got lots of information, and this could be, probably a whole day long workshop, but that'll really help them focus in on exactly speaking to some specific questions about people who are here today and specific questions or what you're hoping to learn from today. So feel free to either raise your hand, come off mute, or put in the chat any kind of specific things you're really hoping to today. So I'm gonna pause and see who would like to go first with that question. Don't be shy.
I'll go first.
Great, thanks, Josue.
So, not being originally from California, being born and raised in Texas, and going on my 4th year in California, I am working utility vegetation management right now, right? But there's still a lot of forest practices that I'm not quite familiar with at the moment, from the state of California. So for me, it's that piece of information where the gaps that I might be missing on understanding California forest management, So that's going to be the most crucial for me, right? I can do urban forestry, right? I can do urban forestry, private forestry, utility forestry management, but national forest management, deep in the middle of the woods, stuff like that, that's something that I'm missing a gap in. So for me, that's would be my focal point on what I want to learn more on.
Great, perfect. Thanks so much, Josue.
I want to say that a very small portion of my presentation is places for you to go to ask that very question, and you can ask it very specifically for geographic areas that you envision working in. So it's a quick slide, but it is in fact the definitive location of what is actually proposed and planned and or under NEPA or CEQA. So I can help you with that, and I'm happy to follow up with, or Eric could do that, I'm sure. Your name isn't Vance, by the way. Vance is.
I already said that.
Oh, I missed it.
I said that in the beginning, and I said who I am. Yep.
Oh, good. I'll get into some of that.
Okay. Thanks, Josue. Who else has a question or something that they want to specifically kind of get out for today?
I'll go. I think I'm really hoping to learn some of the management planning and goals related to the Business and Workforce Development Program, since we at NFF will be applying for those grants as they come through. So really learning how to plan our projects so that they can meet those goals and hopefully get some funding for that.
Great. Thanks, Maggie. Who else has something you're really hoping to learn about or glean from today? And you can either unmute or raise your hand. Thomas, did you have something?
Well, I came in late. I'm driving because I forgot this was even going on. I got a reminder while I was in Home Depot because I'm also doing another side job. But yes, I'm very interested in the whole thing. So I don't know if I've missed anything or what, but I'm here to learn just as much as I possibly can so I can promote my my adventure in vegetation management and slash and burn cleanup as I can.
Great. Yeah, you haven't missed anything. We haven't yet started. We were kind of getting a sense of what specific questions or focus areas people might want to have so the speakers can direct their comments specifically. So thank you for that. And you haven't missed a thing yet.
Good. Well, I'm all ears then.
Great. Anyone else? And again, you're welcome to put it in the chat or come off of mute or raise your hand. We'll just give another opportunity if anyone has something. Okay, so let's go ahead. I do want to start with a poll. So if you're driving or if you can't participate in this, there should be a pop-up screen that says, have you partnered with the Forest Service before? So if you can just go ahead and click yes or no. Once the majority of folks have participated in that, I will end that and share the result. And so this is another way we're trying to get a sense of who's in the room and you know, help the speakers then understand who they're speaking to. So it looks like the most people have, so I'm just going to share the results, and it looks like about 50-50 in terms of have you worked with the Forest Service or not. So thank you for that. And then next question that we want to ask is kind of what's the primary landowner or land tenure partner that your business or you work with? Is it federal public lands? Is it industrial forest landowners or family-owned non-industrial landowners? And again, you can just choose one of those. I actually think you can choose multiples too.
Yep.
Yeah. And so just one more opportunity. Okay. So I'm going to end this and share. And if you didn't get a chance to do it, you can also put it in. So majority of people are federal and public lands, also then family owned, and not very much fewer, just one with the industrial forest landowners. So we're going to do one more here. Actually, we're going to do two more. So this is your project focus. Kind of what's the primary focus of your project? Is it work in the woods, the thinning, the cutting, whatever that might be, or are you in between in transportation or facility? Are you in a facility at the end or something else? And if there's an other and you want to submit that in the comments, you're welcome to do that as well. Give one more moment for people to answer anything and then I'll share. There we go. So the majority of folks here are working in the woods, but then also half, on the roads and facility transportation piece and 25% in a processing facility. And so then last, thank you for all of these answers. Last question before we go to the first speaker is kind of what would you say the primary business need you have is? Is it equipment? Is it training? Is it something else? And again, if you have an other for either of these questions, please feel free to put that in the chat and I will read that for the benefit of the recording and also for the speakers. So let's take just a moment to say what this might be. And please do put the other in the chat if you are have an opportunity to do that. Thank you. One person saying biomass removal and processing. Maybe one or two more folks might be participating or responding. We'll just give about a few more seconds for this poll. I think there's a lot of others, so great. Okay, so then I'll share these results. So it is kind of split here as well. And then I'll read the comments coming in. Biomass removal and processing, project development and management. Great. Thank you, Maggie and Tara. So we'll have a few other questions that we'll do right between the two speakers. But for right now, we're going to start with Bruce Goines. And Bruce, you can go ahead and get your page set up and launch, and I'll introduce Bruce. Bruce has been active in forest management resource issues for over 50 years. He worked for the U.S. Forest Service for 40, including 20 as a wildland firefighter and professional forester, and another 20 for the Pacific Southwest Regional Forester's Office, managing statewide programs supporting forest community capacity building, forest products production and utilization, forest biomass utilization, and addressing community and tribal economic development issues. His last 10 years were as the Economic Services Group Leader for the Pacific Southwest region, focusing on forest community health, partnership development, and monetizing byproducts of forest health activities, including biomass and forest carbon. After he retired, he served as the director of the Novato Fire Protection District and the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority Joint Powers Authority, a 10-year, 200 million voter-approved JPA, Bruce, to address Marin County community wildfire prevention needs. So loads of experience, and he's going to be our first presenter. So Bruce, when you're ready, you can share your screen and we'll go ahead and go from there. And you're muted in case you... It's still muted. Let me see it. Yep, still muted.
I'm now.
There you go.
Be patient. Give me a second here, folks. And the PowerPoint. Oh boy. Catherine, you have that up. This just dropped off my screen entirely.
Okay, yep, let me get it.
Just go ahead and put it up.
I just need to open it, so let me just get that.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for listening in here. I want to thank Vance and Kathleen and all for the opportunity to talk about forest management here in California and how it relates to your potential projects. I know that there were several specific questions. One was on forest practices. The other, Maggie, you asked about management friendly goals. I'll cover that a little bit. And I welcome you all here and appreciate the opportunity. So let's go ahead with this first slide. Let's go to that next slide, please. So today, I'm going to give a brief overview of the forest health conditions in California. It's a big subject. We don't have very much time to do it. I'm going to summarize the current assessments that are in place that identify the priority areas for restoration treatments here in California, and I'll share some of those key resources. So those that wonder about what's going on, what's planned, to link to that, and then finally, I'm going to go over what attributes presumably you're all applicants, and so what your project proposals to the CAL FIRE program. There's certain attributes that are critical, and Maggie, it kind of comes to your question about, what are the goals of the program? Well, if you can't shoot an arrow into those goals, right into the heart of the goals, you're going to have some problems. So I just want to, I'll enumerate those goals and make sure that you comprehend those. It's critical to the program. And then this PowerPoint, between myself and Eric, this is just the beginning. I'd offer myself, but really, CAL FIRE contacts, I think you all know that your specific projects, you need to work with them directly. They give you technical assistance and advice and really help you to customize those so that they're very competitive. Okay, so next slide, please.
Okay, let me get that. All right.
Okay, so just a quick statement here that, we're all aware that the condition of our forests here in California is our forests are in really rough shape, and we've experienced catastrophic fires. According to U.S. Forest Service, this seems low to me. 10.7 million acres between 2000 and 2022, but we're actually, literally millions of acres of fires pervasive. The second point of here, insect disease, pervasive. I mean, it's just everywhere. All you need to go is to go outside and look. I'm in Marin County here. It's here. Stand density is thinning. We have insects and diseases. It's really pervasive. And bottom line is that there's really been a substantial decline in forest health across all forest types throughout the West, and not just California. And there's just been an amazing amount of work done. When I was working with Regional Forester Randy Moore back around 2000, we started this dialogue around this concept of pace and scale. And there's just been extensive work between forest, federal, state, industrial, non-industrial, in essence, an agreement that we really need to increase the pace and scale. And so I'm sure you're all aware of this last couple of points, is that California has come out officially, Forest Service has come out officially, and they've made a commitment to increase the pace and scale. They have this 1 million acres. It's not per year, but it's a 50-50 deal. But the bottom line is that there's maps, there's data, but it also tells the same story. And bottom line is that we do have a commitment to try to affect a change. So let's next slide, please. Okay, this is one of several I think important data points. The United States Forest Service Forest Health Protection Group, which works in cooperation with CAL FIRE, they conduct an annual survey of the current health of California's forests. Every year they fly every acre and they generate a map. And that map is, they have a statewide map. There's data associated with it. Every single forest, you can go to a site. But what I'm saying, the first point is that this link here, this is a map that actually has polygons that have been identified as priority treatment for forest health in California. And so, Kathleen, I think you'll send that out here to all, but click on your forest, look at the map. It's frightening, but the polygons are there. And the statement that introduces this is the second bullet, is in quotes, is I'm reading, that there's an urgency to restore and maintain forest resiliency to wildfires and drought, and accelerate reforestation and landscape level stand density and fuels reduction treatments. This is the mantra, official mantra of the United States Forest Service in regards to what we're interested in. This is the intent of really, it aligns perfectly with the intent of this program. So Maggie, we'll get to some specifics here, but this forest health treatment report, and I just, third bullet is literally there are millions of acres that have polygons that have been identified that are in need of stand density reduction. And those that you are foresters know exactly what that means and how to measure it. The fourth bullet from Joe Sherlock, who is the Region 5 regional silviculturist, good friend of mine. Joe has done an analysis of the 10.7 something million acres, the burden of the United States Forest Service alone is we have a backlog of 1.75 million acres that are in need of trees being restored onto the landscape. Think about that. It's astounding. It's about 15%, not 15, maybe anyway, a substantial amount of California's forests. So the bottom line here is that priority areas they're available, and you can go to those. Magnitude of the problem is massive, but there are polygons on the map. Next one, please. Okay, you all know what this is. This is an image from 2018. CAL FIRE has done their work on priority landscapes for reducing wildfire risk. So we talked about stand density management, reforestation in the last slide. This is about risk of wildfire. This map is 5 years old. They've updated the criteria, and let's call this a heat map. The newer map is a lot hotter than this old map. But in essence, we know where these things are, and your communities know exactly what those priority landscapes are. Critical, we're getting, anyway, move on to the next one. This is an important one. So, and this should be more, not having my PowerPoint, Kathleen. So
we'll send out the final PowerPoint when we send the recording.
So the question here is, do you know what's going on in your forest? Do you know what your federal land managers are doing? Do you know what your industrial land managers are doing? Do you know what your private non-industrial landowners are doing? And if you don't know, you better know it. And in essence, there are several key places to start, but it's incumbent upon you to tap into those resources. I'm a big believer. Every county CAL FIRE requires community wildfire protection, actually by county under state responsibility areas. Are you familiar with that CWPP? And do you know what it says? Do you know what the list of projects are? That CWPP identifies priority hazard mitigations in your area. And it's, CWPPs are typically for the built environment as opposed to the landscape environment. But so this is one piece of data in a four puzzle piece here. What's the CWPP say? The second one does not show. This says Federal Forest Service 5-year timber management plan. I'm dating myself. With the Forest Service used to produce an annual 5-year program of work. Every single forest said exactly what they were proposing to do, where the areas were, acreages, volumes, et cetera, so that businesses could align themselves and bid. That's been changed. And Kathleen, you'll send out, there is what's called a U.S. Forest Service out-year program of work. And the link will provide that to you, but you can click on that link and it shows specifically what reforestation are they planning, what pre-commercial thinning are they doing, what trails work, what fuel management work are they doing, what commercial timber work are doing, what restoration stand density management work. And so that link, this is a critical link to you. This is the Forest Service's articulation of their program of work to the extent that they know it. It's new, but it's critical. This will tell you. And then the next two, private industrial and private non-industrial, I'm sure that you have all knocked on the door and shook the hand of your local CAL FIRE Ranger Unit lead. And CAL FIRE is the cognizant agency that oversees and inspects all proposed and pending and ongoing activities in forest management. So, and this is, it's not rocket science. Knock on their door. And then what's not here, and out of respect for several of you on the call, what is I'm finding that the RCDs are becoming prominent in leadership in addressing local forest health, restoration, reforestation, fire risk reduction. And so just like you need to shake the hand of your CAL FIRE Ranger Unit, you need to shake the hand of your Resource Conservation District Director and sit down and talk to them about what's the proposed work, what's going on. So I want to pause for a second. Any questions here? I'm sorry, this is an old slide. But are any questions here about these data sources? These are your sources of information. Okay. Well, let's move on then, please.
Okay. Josue, did you unmute to have a question?
No, I did not. I'm good.
Okay. All right. Next slide.
Okay.
Hello?
Oh, somebody. Hi,
Yeah,
Thomas.
actually, I was trying to figure out how to get these things to work on here so I could talk to you. So where do you find these links at, especially the CWPP link that you were talking about?
Yeah, I would contact your CAL FIRE representative to ask them to link to the CWPP. We have one in my county here. The last two candidates that came from both produced them. But I think, Thomas, it would be go to your CAL FIRE representative and find out what that there should be one done every 5 years.
Okay, I know her pretty well here in Butte County, so that's not a problem. I can go talk to them.
Thanks, Thomas.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, we're going to shift gears. We have a lot of work to be done. And now, Maggie, I think that this is going to get to some of your questions about goals and objectives. So the Wood Products Bioenergy Program, this is the CAL FIRE program. If I had a logo there, I would have put it, but this is its intent: support diverse set of businesses and workforce development projects. Most importantly, maintaining and enhancing the wood products infrastructure to supply healthy, resilient forests along with people ecosystems that depend upon them. So let's see, I'm just paraphrasing, what is in that program, but I'll get much more specific on the next handful of slides.
Okay. Oh, cool. And I also want to thank Carrie for putting the link in the chat. So for those who didn't see, for the community wildfire protection plans.
Okay,
Go ahead.
Maggie. So Maggie, this is this is straight off of their website and the program marketing materials. If you're applying for the Wood Products Bioenergy Program, your project must directly address improving the health of California's forests. And these are the objectives of the program. Starting at the top, reforestation and restoration of damaged landscapes. Millions of acres, a couple million acres of reforestation that needs to be done, millions of acres of restoration. How does your project address that? Restoring forest health. What does that mean? I'm a forester, going out in the forest, going to areas that are diseased and distressed, removing damaged trees, doing thinning, stand density management. These are just standard forest practices, but taking a forest that has not been touched in some time, that is, that's stressed due to stand density issues, drought, what have you, is to go in there and modify the current condition into a desired future condition to make it more healthy and resilient from insects, disease, and fire. The fourth bullet is strategically placed. That's my word, strategically placed, because that's the bottom line. You just don't do it anywhere. You do fuel hazard reduction work consistent with your CWPP, consistent with forest management plans that you have, consistent with whatever assessments that have been done. But from my perspective, it's areas of ingress and egress. It's defensible space for communities. It's shaded fuel breaks for communities. And it is, in essence, the landscapes that surround the community where that 95th percentile fire is going to come at you on November 6th from the Northeast. It's dealing with stand density and hazards in that area, but strategically placed fuel hazard reduction work. And last, not last, because there's no slide, the reintroduction of fire in the landscape, critical, needs to be done. Let's go to the next one, please.
Okay.
Similarly, the program supports trained personnel, and I know we have a couple folks here on that are dealing with personnel and training equipment. in-woods equipment, transportation equipment, processing facilities, anything that is in the web of treatment that helps to, restore health and resilience. I worked woody biomass utilization. I managed the biomass utilization program for the Forest Service for 20 years. Low value biomass, economically viable solutions for that. Really difficult, but citing bioenergy facilities. There's a wood flower facility that was, wood densification, pelletization, anything that helps move that low value stuff off the land into the marketplace and getting value is important to this program. The fourth bullet here is that if your project touches the forest, if it's reliant upon resources, if it's reliant on wood products coming in, if it's reliant upon specific projects, it's incumbent upon you to identify the suite of projects that are on your landscape that relate to your project. You can't just say, I'm going to make this nice thing, this beautiful piece of equipment. You need to actually tie it to specific work on federal, state, industrial, non-industrial projects that are planned. So you need to tie things specifically to actual work that's going on the ground. And then you need to provide certainty that NEPA and CEQA has been completed for your project activities. So Maggie, this is fairly general. There's about 8 points. This is general. I don't know that there are specific deliverables or specific metrics that have been identified, but these are the goals of the program, and goals and objectives, no metrics. Let's go to the next one.
Okay.
So again, if your project, if it interfaces with work on the ground, a boot on the ground, forest management projects and activities, this is a must. The first bullet is that you must provide assurance that the appropriate environmental compliance is in place. CEQA and NEPA, 2 4-letter words, right? It's very difficult, but NEPA and CEQA. You have to identify and confirm that indeed there's a program of work and that there are contracts and agreements in place to assure the availability of feedstocks. You're going to have to enumerate those. You don't have to not copy, but in essence, these 6 projects exist, and the CEQA was or NEPA. This ecologically sound, that from my perspective, environmental compliance proves ecological, that is sound and will restore. But this last bullet, and this is really important, particularly for foresters, that an evaluation panel wants to make sure that they're, and Maggie, this comes down to, I think, your question about goals and objectives, and here is a metrics piece. How many acres are you going to affect? Let's say you think you're going to affect 12,000 acres over the next 5 years. That's great. But what you must do to affect a change, which means in essence, I'm doing a bunch of acres. Well, there are these principles that foresters understand, SDI, which is stand density index. It's a metric. There is an appropriate stand density metric for all forest types at all ages. And typically you go in and treat because the stand density is too high and you need to lower it. So it's incumbent upon you to learn some lingo here. Ask the question about SDI. What are these projects going to do in getting to the appropriate SDI? Trees per acre is another. Trees per acre per the age of the forest stand. There are some standard, there's a standard trajectory for how many, go from a lot of trees to less and less and less, depending upon the age. And so talk about trees per acre for the stands that you're addressing. Fuel profile characteristics, this is it. Ground fuels, ladder fuels, crown fuels. There are some standards that we hope to achieve. Crappy right now, dense and thick and all over. So you want to deal with the ground fuels, the ladder fuels, and the crown fuels. You must really work to articulate the outcomes. This last bullet is, what are the outcomes of your proposed project investment? If they've invested in you, what are you going to return back as far as outcomes? And so not just acres, but real stand metrics, SDI, trees per acre, and fuel profile, and there may be some others. So I'm going to my last slide here. And I apologize. This is a lot of stuff in a short amount of time. And I don't know the audience that well, but these are my closing thoughts. That there is an overwhelming body of work facing us here for restoration. Your projects have to be designed to be a part of the future forest and fuels management work, and tell us that story. Tell us how it relates, and then Thomas and team and others work with your local forest managers to identify what's going on, what problems are they working on, what projects are they working on, and how can you integrate and help to address them. So I thank you very much. That's the last slide. Thank you. My name is Bruce Goins. I'm a registered professional forester. This is my email. Yes, I'm a winemaker, but it's homemade wine, but we just got Best of Show in Marin County for the second time in a row. So I have fun. But finally, my email and phone number, anyone that has questions, please feel free to call me. So
Thank you, Bruce. And we will include that information as well when we send out the recording and the slides overall. So thank you very much, Bruce. And I did want to mention that we will have time for Q&A at the end. I want to let Eric present next. I want to take a quick poll. So last question here. If you can just take a moment on the screen and kind of say, what are the biggest barriers that your business, your organization face? Certainty of supply, availability of long-term contracts, raw materials, staffing, or lack of RFPs, registered professional foresters. So take a moment. And again, if there is an other, and if this is multiple, you could put more than one. If there is an other and you want to go ahead and put that in the chat, that would also be great. And let's just take about just under a minute, and then we'll get ready to go for Eric's presentation, and then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end and another announcement about some upcoming workshops. So just about 10 more seconds, give a full minute for this. About 50% of people have participated. All right. Thank you, everyone. So here's what we've got in terms of primary barriers that folks are. And again, if you have an other and you'd like to share it in the chat, please do so. A couple at least had others, so please do that, and we will, but there's some of the big barriers. So thank you. And then Eric, if you want to go ahead and get ready to share, I'll present a little bit about Eric. So Eric Holst is a forester and associate vice president for Natural Climate Solutions and Environmental Defense Fund. He's an expert in developing innovative conservation and climate resilient strategies on working forest, farms, and ranches. While at EDF, he's worked to establish productive partnerships with farmers, ranchers, and putting EDF at the forefront of collaborative conservation efforts. He's been a pioneer in developing market-based solutions for biodiversity conservation, climate mitigation, and climate resilience. He's a California registered professional forester and a member of the California State Board of Food and Agriculture. And prior to EDF, Eric held positions as the executive director of the Resources Legacy Fund and a program officer for the environment at the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation. He also serves on the President's Advisory Council for Agricultural and Natural Resources at the University of California and the Dean's Advisory Council for the College of Ag and Environmental Science at UC Davis. So thank you so much, Eric, for being here, and go ahead whenever you're ready.
Cool. It's great to be here. And let me just check, Kathleen, our end time is 1, is that correct?
Yeah, and yeah, and so if you can do 10 to 12 minutes,
Yep.
we'll have a few
I'm
minutes
gonna
for
go
that.
10 minutes real quick. And I'm gonna
And
try
if
to do
folks
that on
have
a
time to
normal-
stay after and want to for Q&A, we can also hold that too.
Yeah, and you'll get my contact information and Bruce's, and
Yeah.
happy to dig in depth. So I'm going to drill in on an element of what Bruce talked about, which is compliance, and sort of like, are you going to be aligned appropriately with the federal and state government, which I think is really important. Like, it can be kind of annoying to be a practitioner on the ground and sort of have to comply and have to follow the rules. But the reality of California is it's probably the most sort of, depending on your side of the coin, either the most thoughtful jurisdiction about forest management on planet Earth, or the most burdensome. Like, one, there depends on your perspective, but the degree of intensity that California and its federal partners place on management of forest and the content of those forests is probably greater than any other place on Earth. And so that just means you gotta be aware of that environment. And the most successful sort of businesses and practitioners are those who kind of understand that environment and have it work to their advantage, as opposed to if you get sideways with it, it can slow you down, it can stop you. And so I just and there's no way to in 10 minutes describe to you all this complexity. So what I wanted to try to do is really answer a few questions really quickly, and then like I said, Bruce or I can go into more depth if you need to. But so these regulations are confusing and numerous. The rule books are, believe me, you don't want to read them. And so, I'm going to try to quickly summarize what are the focal issues, just to get your mind centered on what issues you need to be aware of as you're putting together your plans and your applications for this program. Another sort of way to look at this is not only what are the rules, but what are the policy priorities of the federal and state government. Bruce went over some of that, but I'm just going to reiterate some of like the top level things that are going to be on the mind of all the decision makers associated with a program like this program, or in some of the jurisdictions in which you're working. And so just being aware of what those priorities are can be really helpful. And then just forest management, cutting trees, moving trees around the roads can be controversial. California specializes in that as well. And so, just going to kind of touch a little bit on how you can avoid some of that. The metaphor I wanted to give is essentially like, if you all have ever coached sort of youth sports like soccer or baseball, anything like that, at the beginning of the season, the refs, the league president, whatnot, will say, hey, oh, here's our emphasis for this year. We're going to really focus on improving, if you're a baseball coach, like plays at the plate. Like, we don't want kids getting hurt at the plate. So that's a part of our rule book that we're really going to focus on this year. And that's kind of the way forestry works as well. There's a huge rule book, but at any given moment in time, there's sort of focal issues that you have to be really aware of. And so I'm going to touch on some of those. So real quick, U.S. Forest Service and the CAL FIRE have rules associated with the management of forests. And like I said, it's the rare person that's going to read all those rules. These 6 issues are representative of about 90% of the content of those rules. So if you can kind of wrap your mind around these 6 issues, you're 90% of the way to understanding what the state and the federal government care about when it implements these sort of CEQA and NEPA processes that ensure compliance with regulations. So it's water quality, and that can be in a number of different forms. Pollutants, and I would say sediment are one of the most important issues there. So making sure soil doesn't get into streams. That right there is probably 50% of California's rule book, So if you can just really focus on keeping sediments out of the stream, you're halfway there. Fish and wildlife, right? So we care a lot about the critters that are living in these forests. And those fish and wildlife are protected by a whole suite of environmental laws. The Endangered Species Act is the principle, and there's a state and the federal version of that. So, but just be aware that a lot of the rules center around protecting fish and wildlife resources. Soil would be the third. The productive capacity of soil, the ability of soil to continue to provide the ability to grow trees, and so ensuring that the soil stays in place It helps satisfy both that productive capacity set of regs, but also the water quality sedimentation regs. Cultural resources are really important as well. So ensuring that as you do work in the woods and as you commission projects that are getting out in the woods, that you're aware of the historical importance of from a Native American perspective, but also sort of California history perspective. Timber, this is particularly oriented strong in the California regulations, is the regulations are designed not only to protect the environment, but to protect essentially the industry. The fact that we have the ability to grow timber, we want to continue to have that ability. So there's a set of rules around sustained yield and regeneration that are really central to the regs. And then I think a more contemporary concern is really around air quality. And particularly if you're involved with prescribed fire. I threw in carbon and greenhouse gas flux into that. It's a little awkward positioning, but I think the ability of California forests to continue to store a durable volume of carbon and to reduce greenhouse gas flux being the sort of movement of carbon back and forth. We want to create stability there. And so anyway, I thought that it was really important to kind of, as I wrap my brain around trying to become a registered professional forester, putting it in these 6 categories really helped organize the set of complexity. Areas of emphasis. So those resource issues of concern, these 6, are then manifest in terms of guidance or requirements on the ground. And these are just another sort of 6 bullets on areas where you'll see the representation of the regulations. And so you'll see a lot of, you can't do this here, restricted areas. This area is protected because it's habitat for a particular species, or it's a zone adjacent to a waterway of a particular kind. And so you'll see a lot of restricted areas. Road management is a real concern. Roads can be the source of a lot of problems, a lot of sediment in the streams. So having good roads is really important. Retained features is kind of a forestry term for when you go into a stand to do some harvesting, what are you going to leave behind? And that's a really important issue because what you leave behind is the forest of the future. And it's also the habitat that's going to be used for the critters that are still left behind. So standing trees, dead trees, down wood, those sort of seem like things that you might want to remove, but oftentimes they're the most valuable sort of features for wildlife. So that's really important. Sustained yield planning is a huge concept, but the idea here is that there's going to need to be a sort of understanding in your project that you have thought about the future of the forest and how you're going to continue to have productive capacity for trees and the wildlife habitat that's there. Fire and fuels is probably the principal issue on the mind of most government officials now with regard to forests, particularly in California, where we're losing our productive capacity because of catastrophic fire. And so, whole focus on how to ensure that fire and fuels are structured appropriately. And then tree species composition, a really important issue of late, which is that we have insects and disease. We have certain problems and threats in the forest that are disproportionately affecting particular species or types of critters. So an example of this would be there's a disease called the white pine blister rust. It's a fungal disease. It's been around for a long time. And in the California context, it's having a disproportionate negative effect on our white pines. So sugar pine, western white pine, these are 5 needle pines. And sugar pine, by the way, my favorite tree species. It's a gorgeous tree up in the Sierra and throughout California. And it's really in decline because of this disease. And so ensuring that your projects are sensitive to which species we want to try to favor and which that we have too many of. In parts of the Sierra Nevada, for example, probably have enough white fir. We don't need to protect it. We can be a little less cautious with white fir, a lot more cautious with the pines. So that's just that's another sort of way of kind of interpreting these regulations, making them practical. So when you're in the wood or designing your project, that you can kind of understand what's on the mind of sort of people who are concerned with forests in California right now. I'm gonna close here in 1 minute. I'm gonna show you one more slide, but I wanted to get to Josue's point, which I think it was Josue. You're talking about, you're from Texas. What does it mean to manage forests in California? And I was trying to think of the simplest way to put this. And this is an oversimplification, but it's representative of the majority of, I think, the momentum in forest management in California right now. I think Bruce said it, which is density reduction. how do you reduce, we have too many trees. We have too many small trees, they're too dense, they're creating fire risk. This is not universally true. There are some forests that are in great shape. And so you don't want to apply this without thought, but the majority concern is environmentally friendly density reduction. If you just kind of keep that centered, that's what we're trying to do here. And you get it environmentally friendly by sort of following the regs. Like I said, there's no place on earth that it has stronger regulations. If you follow them, you're going to be in a good place. So that's kind of my summary. The last thing I wanted to share with you is just, kind of like what are some documents that you could go to kind of get a sense of the zeitgeist of the moment? What are policy forest policy makers at the federal and state level most concerned about? And these are just some of the momentum in the last 2-3 years. I should say this is a good time to be getting into the forestry business in California, because there's probably about 5 to 10x more public resources available to do forest management today than there were 3 years ago. And that is because of the wildfire problem. And so the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law were federal policies that are pumping about $8.5 billion federally or nationally into a forest. And a lot of that's going to come to California because of the high wildfire risk. The Forest Service, which is the principal U.S. agency, implementing these federal policies, has implemented something called the Wildfire Crisis Implementation Plan. It's like the best one-stop shop to get a sense of where the priorities are for federal forest management. And I'm just going to, in the interest of time, this will all be sent to you, and all of these blue text areas are links that you can go and sort of dig into more depth. But if you have time to review one plan as you prepare your proposal, probably the most important thing is at the California level, the Wildfire and Forest Resilient Task Force Action Plan. Bruce referenced it. If you had time for only one thing, read that. That is, so the program you're applying to is a California program. The federal government is really important in that context, but the state government is more important. And this is the action plan that is being used by the Newsom administration, by CAL FIRE, and the Wildfire Resilient Task Force. So just keep your eye on that, dig into it, study it, and understand it, and that's going to get you 90% of where you need to go. So I'll leave it at that.
Great. Thank you, Eric. And great job with a lot of information in a very short period of time. And let's open it up for questions. We do want to make mention in just a couple minutes that we have a couple other workshops coming up, but I want to see what questions there are for this, for the presenters here today. So you can either unmute yourself or you're welcome to put your question in the chat as well.
I definitely have a question for you all. And maybe Eric, maybe you can help me answer this question, or anybody on the call. So you mentioned environmental friendly, right? I don't know if you're familiar with air curtain burners and what they do.
No.
Yeah. No.
I am. I'm
Okay.
familiar with air curtain burners.
Okay, so an air curtain burner, it's a one big a burner essentially, and what it does, it burns your wood, it eliminates your wood, when in turn it creates biochar, right? It produces biochar,
Yeah.
and it comes with a biocharger on it, so as it's being used, it's generating its own power to keep on running instead of you having to refuel it. Now, the company that I work for, we own a couple of those equipments, but we have a very, very hard time getting permits approved for that piece of equipment. It's specifically in the San Joaquin Valley, right? And in southern portions towards San Diego County, stuff like that. Do you happen to know why they might not be approving those types of use of those machines, being it is environmental friendly as opposed to other type pieces of equipment out there?
Boy, that's
a good one,
Eric,
Josue.
maybe you can go.
Yeah,
Eric.
I can start to tackle it. I mean, I think the core problem is that this, and particularly the southern San Joaquin Valley, so we're talking about,
Yep.
Bakersfield, Fresno, that area, has the worst air quality in America, right? And it's not all self-generated. A lot of it is air that comes in from LA, into the basin. And so air quality regulators there are very concerned about, any new source of emissions. So I think that this is not a problem that we can resolve in the time we have, but Josue, I would say the argument that you need to start making is that that what you're doing by treating these forests is going to reduce emissions from catastrophic wildfire. We all know as Californians what it's like to live in California during the time when we have wildfire catastrophes. It makes the air unbreathable. Many of us just want to leave the state. And so you have to sort of start to make the argument that the emissions that you're going to be generating in this biochar production are much less than is going to be the case when we have the catastrophic wildfires. It's going to be a hard case to make, but there are many organizations working to, I think, hopefully make it easier for you to get those permits.
I think the key is also, what data source do you have? Some clear peer-reviewed data that articulates what Eric is currently saying. Placer County did some work about a decade ago comparing different disposal methods, and it was the Air Quality Management District. Bruce Springsteen and team, Tom, I forget his name, produced a publication. Maybe Kathleen, folks could contact Bruce Springsteen in Placer County, ask for that publication. But it's a roadmap, a bit of a roadmap as far as how you articulate the relevant air quality benefits associated with alternative disposal methods. It's tough. And then you can compare. This would have other been what, open burned versus your air curtain burner. You can show that there's a difference, a substantial difference, but it all comes down to that local air quality management district understanding this before they're going to issue a permit.
Great, thank you both. Yeah, and I'll get that from you to send to Carrie for the follow-up. I do want to mention, before we get another question, I did put in the chat the upcoming workshops that are this week, one Thursday and one next Wednesday, and the links to register there will also include those in the follow-up email that goes out. Does anyone else have questions? I know we're at time and a couple of people have had to jump off, but if there's other questions that we can get to today, we'd be happy to do that. You can unmute or put them in the chat. Is that it? Does anyone else? Got two experts here that are happy and willing to answer your questions. Okay. Going once. All right. Thank you all for coming. Again, these upcoming workshops then are follow-ups from some of the ones that we've done in the past where participants said they would like additional information. So there's project design and planning and developing budgets for competitive proposals. So those are also free and available. And from that, one of them is, they're both noon to 2, so a little bit longer. So please feel free, and if you don't find those, reach out to one of the project team that were listed in the beginning. And thank you all for coming, and we will get these notes out as soon as possible. And thank you so much, Bruce and Eric, for your valuable information and presenting a lot of information in a very condensed time. And we'll look forward to being in touch with you all in the future. Thomas, did you unmute with a question or just
I just wanted to say thank you. I really learned a lot from just listening, and I got a pretty good idea of what I've got to do to participate in this grant writing structure. So this was a very valuable program for me to listen to. I appreciate it.
That's great. Thank you for saying that. Yep. And you're right. It can be high level and super informative. So thank you. Yep. Okay, everyone. Have a great day, and we'll see you on the next call.